Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. We won't be sharing any webcams today, so sorry you won't be able to see our beautiful faces. My name is Andrew Townsend. Like I said, I'm with eLearning Brothers. I'm one of the marketers here on the marketing team. Today, our session is going to be talking about our course starters. We're going to be talking about the nitty-gritty of our course starters. This session will be recorded, and we'll send a copy of the recording out to everybody who has registered, so you can look for that in your email. Later in the day, we will also post a copy of this on our blog, so you can find it and share it there as you will. If you have questions during the webinar, we'll be ready to answer your questions in the questions panel. So do feel free to use the questions panel as you need. It looks like some of you have already found that. And we're glad that you joined us, and we hope that you enjoy what we've got to present. All right, so today we've got our very own Bill Milstid, our senior developer, with us today. He helps develop these course starters and is going to show us how to get under the hood and take a look at those. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass the screen over to you, Bill.
All right, thanks, Andrew. So I'm Bill Milstid, like Andrew said, and today we're gonna be walking through course starters, as Andrew mentioned. We're gonna mostly be focusing on Captivate, but it'll be kind of a pretty similar conversation with the other two main tools, two big tools that we support with course starters as well. And kind of the focus of today is really just to go through what a course starter really is, because it's something a little new for us. And then I'm going to break down kind of the improvements, if you want to think about it that way, that we've made to templates by way of course starters. Okay. So jumping right on in, again, so this is we're primarily going to be focusing on Captivate here. This is Cap 2019. Also applies to version back, but we mostly focus here. And what I've got open is actually one of these course starter things we're talking about, which from the first glance, you'll notice looks a lot different than ELB templates, especially in Captivate in the past. And what's going on here is that, well, again, we've kind of taken a completely new approach, or at least we've made some big changes to what we're doing. Structurally, everything with the way that we approach templates, even down to the way that we package them, right? So what a course starter actually is, just to get back on track, and I think I was starting to ramble there a little bit, but what a course starter actually is it's a grouping of multiple templates, right? So in the past, we delivered individual templates, kind of standalone layout files, interaction files, things like that. And then we moved to something called styles, which was really a grouping of a bunch of very similarly themed templates. And that now kind of has evolved into this course starter idea. The idea is that in one package for all the three big authoring tools, we're going to provide you with every single thing you need to get started in a course. So a grouping of layouts, a set of interactions, and a quiz file that are all themed, styled, designed similarly, kind of within a family. There won't always necessarily be the same interactions, layouts, and kind of quiz approach between course starters, but there always will be about a similar amount. So I'm going to break into that now. First thing you notice, right? So this Captivate screen looks a lot different than a typical Captivate screen or a template you might get from us, as I had mentioned before, and that's because we've actually taken to grouping our slides in the new version of course starters. So if you see over to the left-hand side here, you'll see three main slides in the film strip. Those are groups of slides for layouts, interactions, and our quiz, right? And so within those groups are the individual slides that fit that group, fit that category, right? So within our quiz, you hit this little twirl down here, it'll open up and all of our quiz slides will be there. Same thing with interactions, and same thing with our layouts. We've done that for a couple different reasons, mostly for workflow and kind of presentation purposes. As you're working through them, that kind of grouping in the film strip it's kind of inconsequential. You can choose to turn that on or off if you desire. It's not one of the more important things, but it does kind of stand out as something that is new, especially when you first get into the file. Now, speaking of new things and getting into the file, I want to now walk through some really what I find to be some pretty important details about these course starters. So aside from the fact that we've really kind of tried to put a heavy emphasis on design, layout, right, making these course starters as beautiful, and well designed as possible. Aside from that, we've really kind of upped the game with these templates, with how we're structuring them and getting them set up for you as well. And the first kind of big example of that is the way that we're handling masters in all of our templates.
Hey, Bill, before you move forward really quick, I wanted to clarify something here. So you're going to be demonstrating today in Captivate. These are our course starters,
yes, sir.
But they're not only available in Captivate. Is that right?
No. So that's kind of what I was mentioning at the very top there, and I was kind of hinting at. I was actually just about to hint at it a little bit as well there with this discussion. So we are focusing on Captivate today. We're looking at how we're structuring and approaching our Captivate course starters. But again, most of this would be largely applicable to Storyline and Lectora, the two big other tools that we use. I mentioned just a moment ago that we've kind of taken to grouping files, for instance, in Captivate here in that film strip. I showed you that a second ago. We're structuring similarly in Storyline. We've got individual Storyline scenes set up for our layouts, interactions, and quizzes. So we're kind of grouping those individually or similarly there. Doing the same thing in Lectora, where we've set up chapters and then titles, chapters and then pages within that on the actual Lectora file.
So
okay, thank you. Everything I'm doing and showing going forward, was kind of going to move into how masters work now. I'm going to jump right into that. All of this would also be directly applicable, certainly to Storyline. Less so with Lectora, just by the nature of how Lectora works. But in any case, in Captivate and in Storyline, we've gone to pretty big lengths in course starters now to improve, if you want to say improve or to enhance or to really just pack our masters. One of the challenges that developers have mentioned in the past is that, especially in Captivate, master slides can be a little tricky because sometimes in templates they might be a little lacking, or there may not always be exactly the right number of elements just because of the way a tool might work. Well, what we've done is we've really made an effort to go through our master setup to provide you with absolutely as much detail that's kind of pixel perfect detail. So exactly where you're going to want it to end up in the final product, right? So as you would expect a template, but with every bit of the detail, where possible that you are going to end up seeing in your final product. So less complicated way of saying that is that we've gone in and really styled the masters very heavily. In the past, and in a lot of other, some of the Captivate templates that you may see, certainly in some of the Storyline templates that you may see from those tools, and then also some of ours in the past, you might have only gotten, the major element placeholders on a master. So your title, your subtitle, here's the spot for your image. That's very typical of development. But what we've done is gone in and added also all of the decorative elements that you may want, and we've tried to structure so that they're usable in a kind of a friendly way. So here's what I mean by that. So this is our welcome layout. If I insert new slide from welcome layout, you're going to see that right off the bat, it's almost identical to what I had on this previous slide, right? So position, everything's exactly where we want it. But you also have these decorative elements. Now, this particular course starter is in work, so you don't have instructions over to the left-hand side, but when it's done, there will be. There will also be instructions on telling you how to actually keep this kind of decorative stuff in there, format it properly, and get it set up so it's exactly like the template previous, right, that was shown finished. So, having enhanced masters means that you absolutely can go on and add new slides extremely easily and kind of get that full design view that you're looking for. It also means that you can copy and paste very easily between files. And because we've gone in and saved out all of our designs here as themes, you can apply those to new files extremely easily and get this kind of nice style with a click of a button. Other than that, another really important thing that we've done with all of our course starters is we've thought about mobile heavily before approaching the development of all of our course starters. And so that really applies to a couple different things. One is how accessibility works with these files. That kind of ties well with mobile. So we've gone in and we've made sure that all of our, I'm getting kind of two things jumbled up here for you, but what we've done, we've basically gone in and we've made sure that everything we've built here for you is geared with an eye toward mobile, toward, you know, and then later accessible friendly viewing. Okay. So what I mean by that is from the mobile standpoint, obviously we've gone in and kind of set everything up for you. Both from the master so that your elements are set up and styled appropriately for our different breakpoints, right, in our view here. But in addition to, you know, setting up your positioning and styling, etc., we also kind of throw a portrait blocker up in our portrait views that we have set up here in JavaScript. And that's something you don't have to worry about. You don't have to ever touch to have it function. You can turn it off very simply and easily just by removing those items. But we do that because one of the biggest complaints that I've heard through a lot of folks with Captivate especially is this kind of mobile portrait view. So we've actually taken to putting in a little blocker there that's customized to kind of prevent that particular view from showing up. Again, you can edit or not. But part of the thought with that, in addition to kind of user feedback and stuff we've kind of, you know, encountered along the way, is we did also move to breakpoint view, which two-part with that one as well. So all of our course starters, especially exclusively in Captivate, are not fluid box files. They're breakpoint files, but responsive breakpoint files, and we did that really from a workflow standpoint. So, you know, we've worked with fluid boxes since they came out, have gotten to really enjoy them, to really like them. But from a workflow standpoint, we found that breakpoints tend to be a little easier and a little quicker for both us and for our users. Familiarity with them, you know, kind of learning curve stuff, all just seemed like the right idea to move back to that. So in doing so, it's actually kind of made some of the development of this a little easier from our perspective, right? Because we're no longer dealing with wrapping and fluid boxes. Now we are dealing with object positioning at specific breakpoints, and you can use smart positioning to more tightly control that. So from our standpoint, kind of another enhancement is actually returning back to that breakpoint view to make them just a little easier to manage.
We've got a quick question about that.
Yeah.
Is it possible to customize the JavaScript if you want to, but there's no help text provided?
No. So the help text, yeah. So I'm showing you guys, and this is my fault. I should show you a completed course starter, really. But typically there will be help text over the left-hand side of this. I'm actually working this file, and honestly, part of the reason I wanted to show it to you is I wanted to show it to you in work because there are a few things that will change, but I may or may not get to that stuff as we go. Either way, there will be an instruction block over to the left-hand side that'll explain, here's how you turn that on or off. But very quickly, really what it is we've got two images, a blocker image and a smart shape image on the top. Those are initially hidden, as you can see over the properties here. Okay, so they won't show up. And the only time they will show up is if the device is in a portrait orientation, like an extreme portrait orientation. That occurs through this JavaScript, which is not showing up right now, strangely. But we've got a little script in there. There we are. Got a little script in here that calls the font and appends it to the head. We need to keep that. But this tiny little thing here that's just a little query that checks the view and does a couple things, that's what actually controls that portrait blocker. So you could disable it in a couple ways. You could just delete that chunk of JavaScript if you so chose, or you could just delete the SS1 and blocker image images that we have here that we use as the blocker. Again, we'll put that into into the instructions copy when this element is actually finished. Do we have any other questions? Or I was thinking about moving on to just some kind of minor notes about accessibility that we've done here. I had started kind of talking about that in mobile. I was jumping ahead of myself there, but I'm going to move on to that now officially.
Oh yeah, this is fine. We can move on.
Cool. All right. So accessibility has been another focus for all of our course starters, and that's directly applicable to all those tools. So regardless of what tool we're talking about, we've gone in and kind of made tool-specific efforts to maximize accessibility. Now, that is not to say that you know, when you take this and you put your content in it, everything is going to be absolutely 100% compliant. You obviously need to do that work on your own based on what you put into the templates. But what we've done ahead of time is for anything that we've preset, we've gone in and run contrast ratios just to make sure that, you know, your text to background ratio is passable. We've also set up our fonts in such a way that they should be passable for a minimum rating, right? So our body copy here is 22. So kind of coming in from the tool, or coming into the tool rather, you're set up for a 80 to 90% of what you need for compliance, and kind of, you know, maximizing accessibility. Now, that gets a little different. So beyond that, we do some more stuff. Okay, so there gets to be some differences between tools when you go past kind of contrast ratio and font sizes, right? So in Storyline, we actually go in and we do a lot with 508. So for instance, in Storyline, we'll manually adjust the tab order and accessibility settings for anything that's non-essential on screen. So we would obviously leave, you know, a label for our title and our subtitle and potentially our image here, probably just to set it up as a template. You know, the user can turn that on or off. But everything else on the screen, so our background images, our decorative elements, all that stuff, we're gonna go in and turn that off in Storyline so that it just declutters that view. In Captivate, you know, the Captivate works just a little bit differently with accessibility. Then we also kind of have some just different concerns from our users in Captivate. So in general, we've kind of left most of the truly accessibility specific settings in Captivate we just generally leave those alone. So whereas in Storyline, we go in and we make a lot of edits to this stuff and we really clean up a lot of things. In Captivate, we generally leave that be, right? So if you check the accessibility settings, for instance, of this welcome title, you'll notice that we've left it to auto label in Captivate. And similarly, you know, with the tab order here, we've left that as is. Which is to say we can, you know, we may go in and add, but we generally leave that be. Now, a big difference though is that we do use in Storyline and Captivate our accessibility settings to control XAPI as well. So what that means is that on interactions in Captivate, we do make some small tweaks to accessibility settings just to maximize the experience on a screen reader and kind of enable easier XAPI reporting. So in these cases, we will go in and adjust tab order and make sure that it's, you know, appropriately set up if need be. And then also we go through every element in our course starters and we make sure that they're named appropriate to the individual slide and interaction, which may sound like a very simple thing, but that does a couple things for us in these course starters. One, it's just contextually better, and that's kind of where you're going to want to have your file, or how you're going to have your files set up for development, right? So something like this may come over, you know, as Smart Shape 52 or Subtitle 52 or something like that. We're going to go in and just rename that process flow and then what the element is, you know. So for instance, on the conversational dragger, it should be named similarly. We should have a conversational dragger and then names thereafter. So one, that makes it a lot easier to figure out what's going on in an interaction through accessibility there. And then two, it also allows us to get better readouts for XAPI. Because one of the things that we've done in our files here is that we've added custom XAPI tags to every interaction in a course starter. I'm going through the layouts right now, and they don't have any custom XAPI. I'm going through because I realized that I didn't show all of these to you at the top of this like I had intended to. I apologize. My wife and children gave me some sort of illness, and I'm getting cloudy. It might be good to look at these as we go through. All these, so like I was saying, they don't have custom XAPI tied to them, but they all will by default. If you're an XAPI, concerned developer, they all will submit an experience statement as would be expected from Captivate. That's the kind of standard thing. We've gone in though, and we've actually added additional stuff to that. So I'm kind of going to show you two things at once, and then I'm going to bounce back into another one in a minute here. But one of the things that we've done is sorry, my computer's sticking here. We've added a custom XAPI tag to, or a custom, JavaScript script to every button, everything that you might interact with in a given course starter, interaction-wise, right? So if you click, for instance, on this button in this process flow click to reveal, I'll play some of these for you guys in a minute. When you click it, it's going to reveal this content that's shown here, and it's going to hide the subtitle that's here. You'll notice over in the actions pane, which is where you'd expect to go, instead of a typical advanced action, there's a shared action tied to it. And if you open that up, you'll see all this stuff that's going on there. I'm going to get into this shared action stuff in a minute and kind of explain more detail what this is. But I'm using it just kind of to begin the XAPI discussion, or at least kind of get us where we need to go. Toward the bottom of this, there are two values that are verb values for an XAPI statement. You can control those to say whatever you need, but if you'll notice, there's nothing else really going on that you can see that's editable in this action about XAPI. That's because we've got a shared action that we're using here, as I had said, and we've deparameterized anything you don't need to worry about in a given interaction. So what I mean by that is we've just gone through the process of simplifying everything pretty significantly, such that you don't have to see all this stuff if you ever need to make edits to your buttons. So in the past, we might have had, for instance, one copy of this for each one of our buttons on an interaction like this. But now we don't. We just use that shared action that was on the side. We use the same shared interaction that's based off of the same base advanced action to control all of our pedals, and that means that we only really need one advanced action to set everything up, and we can kind of use the structure of shared actions to control the specifics there. It saves a lot of headache in the advanced actions pane. We can also cut down what all the stuff about all the stuff you have to see. So we've got a lot of conditionals on here, a lot of different buttons that we're setting the state of, kind of a lot of stuff that's being disabled and enabled and hidden, yada, yada, yada. Now, a lot of that stuff you might want access to, but there's some other stuff going on in here that just isn't very useful for you to have to see or edit. The XAPI JavaScript that we send is one of those. So basically, this is the base action for the shared action you were looking at here. Hidden in this base action, you'll notice we got a pressed and a focused on this XAPI tab. Those two were the XAPI verb values I'd mentioned you could edit on that button there. But also in it is this JavaScript. This is really the workhorse that gets your XAPI sent out there. We turn that off because it's largely the same script for everything that's going to get sent. The only real two values that matter are these verb values that are here. So we include those in a shared action to kind of declutter. Again, now tying this all together where it gets complicated, back to the accessibility stuff, the way that script actually works that I was showing you is it kind of does a nifty little dance where it picks up the value, the actually ARIA label, the accessibility value, basically, of whatever object you've picked up and uses that to label that object, okay? It's important then that we label, aside from just making it easier for screen readers, because we're also using that accessibility data in our XAPI info, it's very important that we label every single thing in an interaction descriptively, like just nicely, so you know what it is. Because when you see this data coming over in an LRS, you're going to see it like this. It's how you want it to be displayed in your final view. So yeah, a lot of stuff kind of crammed into one idea there. We'll circle back to shared actions in a second. But we've gone through, long story short, we've gone through and we've optimized all of the objects in a course to maximize their display, both in accessibility and in the custom XAPI data that we include in these interactions. All right, now I'm sure that was a little circuitous, so it could very well have been confusing. Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on a little bit, or are we doing okay?
Looks like we're doing okay. I'll jump in if we have other questions that pop up.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, so we hit accessibility and XAPI. All right, now, so you know what? Yeah, we'll just do the shared action stuff. So in the past, so yeah, I kind of talked around it here in the past. One of the big challenges with working with Captivate specifically is this kind of repetitive action bit. It's like I was showing you here in any of these click to reveals, for instance, that we have. You really have this a number of different buttons doing effectively the same thing. And historically, we would have set that up to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 separate advanced actions that all pretty much do the exact same thing, but are stored individually, and you have to go break them apart and edit them. We didn't like that. We figured there's an easier way to do it, so we took advantage of these shared actions to make that happen. Which means now that if you need to edit, the targets of anything in an interaction that we build, all you need to do is click that object and then access the parameters pane for your actions. So no longer, you don't anymore have to go into Project Advanced Actions, find the thing that it's doing, or go over here and hit the folder, however you do it, and then kind of get in through the whole deal. Now you have a pane that shows you exactly what you can and cannot change. And we try to give you a pretty clear description of what that means next to each of these parameters. So, what's your current tab? If you're clicking tab 3, that's going to be timeline tab 3. Now, again, back to that kind of labeling thing. One of the reasons why we're particular about labeling in updated course starters is also because it helps you search things a little bit more easily in your shared actions tab, or shared actions pane, right? So yeah, so all you have to do to make edits now is kind of access the parameters pane and scroll through what's going on with a given interaction, make edits if you need, as you need. Now, you may not have a need for that, but you may. A lot of people come in and just do what we kind of recommend, which is to open up an interaction and just type over the contents that that are there, change the images as you see fit using the slide that we have, kind of copying and pasting that back and forth between slides. But some of our users, especially more advanced users, will take the structure that we have. I'm sorry, this thing's kind of stalling out here. But they'll take the structure that we have often from our interactions and try to apply them to completely new or different interactions. That's something that I get questions about fairly often. So for those users, I actually think that shared actions can be really useful, largely because they can be copied and pasted between projects that are completely unrelated without having to worry about design issues and things like that. Right? So not only could you obviously take this timeline slide and paste it into a new or a differently themed project, and then either kind of restyle it using themes or however you choose. But you could also kind of forgo that process entirely, and now instead of having to rely on the slide level, you could potentially copy and paste shared actions or import them between projects. And that would allow you to apply the work that we've done kind of share, showing and hiding different content objects, as well as that XAPI bit that I was kind of talking around there earlier, to an unrelated project outside of our course starters, even retroactively applying to other templates as long as they kind of fit, the same general number of objects. So long story there is that we've kind of, we've moved over to these shared actions in an effort to really make the workflow with Captivate significantly easier. And I think we've accomplished that. So I'm going to actually go ahead and step back here and show. I'm just going to publish this thing real quickly. Take off the e-learning export here so I can just get a web output. But I'm just going to publish this really, really fast and run through it live, kind of on the on a browser here, so that you can see the full suite of slides that we have here in this course starter as well. In the meantime, I had intended to talk only really about one more specific, feature or kind of unique detail about the course starters, and then I've got a few kind of interesting features to mention. But while I'm waiting for this to publish, if anybody has any specific things that they'd like to learn about, kind of, what these are, or if you give me a circle back, maybe you can toss those over in the questions pane. Suggest a topic here, because we might be a little bit early today on the timing.
No, it doesn't look like we've got any questions on these course starters. You're doing great, Bill.
All righty, good. All right. All right. So that's we got a bug going on that one. That's funny. All righty, here we go. We'll just look at the XAPI output. That's I know why that happened. That's a setting I changed last time here. Anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and just walk you through the top of the export here. This is it published out as an XAPI course. You can see that we've got it hosted up on our server, and it's passing info, just in case anybody's curious, to our LRS here that I'm just opening up. I might kind of bounce over and show you some of the data that does come through from our custom statements as we go. Yeah, so this is it. This is one of our what's going to be coming out here shortly. This is Playfair Course Starter. The general approach is we include kind of the same number of layouts, but often a different variation on which those are. I'll roll through the layouts here. And similarly with interactions, we run a similar number of interactions in each course starter, but which specific interactions those are kind of varies between course starters. So process flow, click to reveal, the one that I was showing you before. This one's in work. We're gonna make a few edits to the final product here in terms of some styling stuff and some objects that pop up there. But this is the basic idea. It kind of works as we might expect, right? So you click a tab, you get a visited state. We end up with our content that reveals over here. And in addition to that, right, we get a number of statements. So if I go into our LRS, we can see all these experience statements. Those all just came from me 2 minutes ago. Playfair Course Starter here, right? But also here we get these pressed statements that appear. If I twirl down on those, we get a lot of detail in those. The object ID here is pretty detailed, but also the context is really important, because what we've done is we've made sure that we map each of our individual statements to the slide on which that object resides, and we then map that slide to the parent course. And so what that allows you to do is you get some analytic reporting on individual slides. So, for instance, assuming we're getting it showing up today, yeah. So you get kind of a good breakdown of what each user might have clicked on a given slide, and you can look at it that way depending on how you have your LRS set up, right? Like you could absolutely look at, so this is the most commonly clicked objects on that given slide, but you could also filter that out in a custom report by an individual user or however you needed to do that. It just gives you significantly more depth for reporting on a given slide than you otherwise would have without having to adjust your workflow. So I'm just going to click through a few more of these and show you some of the remaining pieces that we have here. We've got these kind of a new addition to Course Starters, a new type of interaction that we've created, are these conversational drag and drops. Sometimes it may feature devices, they may feature people. The idea is that we've got a kind of a scenario, a spoken scenario going on with several responses that the user can take and then receive feedback. Timeline is a pretty common interaction that we have. So you're seeing some state change stuff that's popping up here that is a little interesting. One of the challenges we're working on with LRSs is how content gets archived and kind of displayed back. There's some caching stuff that occurs that's sometimes interesting. So you can see how it had saved an earlier session from before. I don't know if anybody noticed that, but it's kind of an interesting little side effect that occurs with LRS and XAPI stuff, which can be wonderful at times and sometimes confusing. But anyway, so this is also another one of our conversational templates that we've included in Course Starters. This is our conversation rater, kind of basic idea, right? We've got a one or two part, or at least a two-part conversation, sometimes more, going on. You frame the scenario. The user selects whether they think it was a 1, 2, 3, or 4-star response on that first page, and then we have several points for feedback. We have a text entry box, layout interaction, kind of however you want to frame it. This one's neat because what we can do here, what's today? Is the 12th? Yes. So obviously, we're going to capture and then display that feedback back to the user. But back to the XAPI functionality that we have in all of these, we also go ahead and create a custom statement after that user clicks submit on this particular interaction. And what it does is it sends, just like you have Captivate sending this experience statement, we send an answered statement that maps to the exact same slide as Captivate. So there's no child activity, it just maps directly to the slide. So we tell you that they answered the text entry value, and that's sure, okay, cool, I know that they answered, but kind of a so what there is that we include what they actually said here in the response element of that layout, and that allows you to get, to capture, detailed responses from your users kind of at will, and then you can obviously use that in reporting. You can generate reports to what's the most common response there, or see what an individual user response was, things like that. There used to have to be a lot of ways to hack around this when you were just running on an LMS. There are other ways to get it done, but we kind of really like having that XAPI functionality in there. All right, so I'm going to move you through just a couple more. This is our one-to-many scenario. Kind of, a couple different points of conversation. You make a decision about what the right response should be, get feedback. Pyramid interaction, always popular. This one tends to show up in a lot of different course starters. All of these, again, optimized for XAPI, like we've been discussing, and they all throw custom values based on what you set in the tool for the individual object name. Okay. All right, so I'll finish running through these here real quick. Standard click to reveal for tab. We also have this knowledge check template that is also in work. Basically, you know, it's kind of exactly what you'd expect. Submit it, get some feedback. I've got to hide this button here. We're going to include that in the shared action for this for the final version. And then after this, it's quiz stuff, right? So really, we don't create custom quizzes in Captivate. We rely on the standard Captivate quizzing. We just go in and set up, back to the first thing we mentioned, we go in and we set up that master view so that everything is positioned and styled and set up appropriately so that you can get a nice looking quiz that responds as you would expect on all of your devices and works properly on all you know, kind of final endpoints, right, through Captivate. So having kind of looked at those real quickly, only the last thing that would have been any different would have been our quiz results slide, right, on this particular one. We do include a custom quiz results slide in every course starter as well as a quiz intro on every course starter to go along with our custom, you know, or to go along with the styled Captivate quiz questions. So the only other thing, just moving along then, that I had to mention about these things, about our course starters here is we also kind of handle variables specifically. And we do this to enable kind of ease of use and to make it a little bit clearer to you kind of what you can and can't do in Captivate. So as you're working through any of our course starters, a big tip would be that if you see an X in front of any variable that we've got here, and this is all in our help, we've got an entire help article, I think maybe even video just on just how we handle variables. But if you see anything with an X in front of it on any of our files here, that's all stuff you want to stay away from messing with. And by and large, we've kind of tried to deparameterize those where we can in shared action, so you don't have to mess with them, you don't have to change them. But those are all kind of critical set aside variables that you'll see when you're in a file. So any of that stuff, don't worry yourself about, and in fact, just try to look over it and let it go. XAPI variables, which are editable and you can kind of play with, although you don't want to obviously try to create a new one and replace names for any reason. There's a couple of reasons that could be a problem, but largely we rely on these specific names in some JavaScript we do. But anything that pertains to XAPI will have XAPI added on to it. And everything else is kind of fair game to touch, although there's not really a ton depending on what type of course starter you have. We will include as much context as possible. So we include this funky little number at the end of it. Well, that corresponds to what the product number is at the top of our course starter, just to help kind of set aside variable names and make them specific to a course starter. That matters when you're copying and pasting between files, especially, as well as for some other reasons. But then also we try to label the variables that you can edit and you can touch as plainly and simply as possible, right? So checkbox 1, checkbox 2, checkbox 3, right? That's obviously going to relate to our checkbox interaction that we have. Text entry would be text entry as well. Other than that, those are kind of the very specific details about working with course starters.
I've got a couple questions that have popped up, Bill.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So you showed a little bit of reporting based on an exported course once it's uploaded into either a server or an LMS. Will that reporting be similar across LMSs?
That was not LMS reporting. So any LMS reporting that you would expect to get by standard, right? So if you're exporting AICC or SCORM, whatever you expect to get out of your LMS as it stands, that's what you're going to get. Okay. What I was showing you earlier is LRS reporting, which is specific to XAPI. Now, some LMSs have an inbuilt LRS, which is a learning record store, right? So some of them have it. I know Docebo has one. I know Swarm Cloud has one. I know SuccessFactors hasn't built. I think SuccessFactors hasn't built in. A lot of them haven't built in now. You may or may not have access to it depending on what your LMS is. But so this is Veracity, for instance, which is a standalone LRS. We actually, for our development purposes, we just use the free version that we offer as kind of a deal through ELB, to be honest, because you can get a lot of data in an LRS without a whole lot of weight. So, but there are a number of other options out there. We kind of think this is one of the best ones. If you need to experiment with it, you can certainly get a free account through them and play and see how that enhanced reporting aspect works. You just do need the LRS separately. Does that answer that question clearly, or let me know if I need better words there?
Sure, I think that covers it. So just as a general reminder, so we do have a support page. If you guys have any troubles with any of these or if you get confused, you can visit support.elearningbrothers.com, and there's a plethora of useful assets and videos and other things there. You can also send an email to support@elearningbrothers.com. We'd love to make sure that whatever templates that you have purchased are working for you, so we'll be happy to help you through those. But here, what Bill's showing on the screen is the support.elearningbrothers.com. You want to talk a little bit about the stuff that's in here, Bill?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in here, to be honest with you. Right now, so our Captivate documents, like specific to course starters, right? This is the third thing over on the top row, so we think it's pretty important. We've got basically all the information that I just covered today, specific to Storyline, populated in there and broken apart. And right now, we're actually working on posting the Captivate specific articles for course starters. So for instance, it's basically the same stuff here. It will be overview of specific interactions. We've got content on variables, et cetera in there. But we've also got some individualized articles for the tools, right? So how to do X, Y, and Z in your individual tools, as well as templates and XAPI. Those are pretty deep. We do an overview of Captivate, Lectora, and Storyline styles for the individual templates that stand alone. And again, this is about to go up for course starters as well. So kind of a two-part coverage there. And then XAPI, we've got it broken down by tool, 30, 35 articles on both just kind of an overview of how XAPI works there, how we've got everything structured, and then how it works in individual tools, or individual interactions and templates as well. So yeah, there's a ton of learning assets out there to help kind of guide as you go through this stuff.
All right, excellent. I don't think we've got any other questions, Bill.
Okay.
Let me, if you don't mind, take back the screen. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Excuse me. Yes, sir. No problem.
All right. Let's make sure it's the right screen here. Okay, so these course starters, if you already have access to our asset library, you've got access to our course starters and other templates. If you would like to just try one, you can register for a free 7-day trial, and in those 7 days you can download 10 assets. So grab a course starter and maybe try some of our other assets as well and see how easy it is to customize and make adjustments and see if it's going to work in your LMS or your LRS. You can get that free trial just by visiting elearningbrothers.com, and we've got a free trial sign up button there. You can also give us a phone call at 801-796-2767. If you want to know more information, just general information about what we offer and other things, you can visit info or send an email to info@elearningbrothers.com, and we'll be happy to send you information about any of our products, from our course starters and asset library to our off-the-shelf training or even our custom solutions. If you're looking for an LMS, we can help you connect with a great one that way as well. So we do want to make sure that you are able to use our products and our offerings effectively. So we have offered all that support after you've downloaded them, and if you need information before you're diving into that, you can get that from us quite easily as well. Thanks a lot, Bill, for joining us. Thanks everybody for joining us on this webinar. We hope to see you guys next time, and we hope you got what you wanted out of this. Thanks. Bye-bye.